It's my pleasure now to introduce Vicky Grove to you, our featured reader for this evening. I'm sharing with you a brief biography that Vicky shared with me, and because there's so much of Vicky's personality in this, I'm going to read it for you and maybe footnote with a little something of my own at the end. I'll let Vicky be nervous about that for a while. Vicky Grove lives in a little yellow house deep in the woods a few miles north of Warsaw with her 7 cats, her dog Imogene, and her husband Mike, notice the order, who teaches music history at SFCC. She has 2 children who are all grown up and living in Indiana with 2 adorable little grandsons. Vicky has written 12 novels for young readers, some of which have been translated into foreign languages. 6 of her books have been on the Mark Twain list, and in 2000, she got to go to Chicago to accept the Midland Authors Award for the best book written for young adults that year by a Midwesterner. She's also written about 300 articles, short stories, and essays for magazines like American Girl, Reader's Digest, and Teen Magazine. In 1998, she was inducted into the Missouri Writers Hall of Fame. When she isn't writing, she's usually wading in the creek, collecting rocks and arrowheads, or sitting under a sycamore tree watching the eagles fly over and reading a good book. I think she's reading the good book, not the eagles. No. Sorry. Although she doesn't have the courage to try and publish poetry, she sometimes composes a poem while hiking the woods and says it aloud to Imogene, who always just loves it. "Brava," barks Imogene. "You are simply a genius." That's what Vicky would like for me to share with you. Vicky's been a writer colleague, a teaching colleague, and a friend for a long time. That's why I just enjoy getting the opportunity to introduce her. My favorite Vicky Grove story goes back to when my son was a little boy, and it was the highlight of my school year and his for me to take him out of school and trundle up to Warrensburg to the Children's Literature Festival, where there were many noted children's writers giving workshops and speaking to the kids and just generally doing great things to make kids love to read. And so my son was familiar with Vicky in that guise. He would often go to her sessions and hear her talk about her books. Well, one day I'm at home and my son's at home. He comes running out the door. He's wild-eyed. And he says, "Mom, there's a famous person on the phone." It was Vicky. And so it's my great, great pleasure this afternoon to introduce to you this famous person that I'm sure you will enjoy greatly as she reads some excerpts from her books for you this afternoon. Vicky Grove.
Now this is no exaggeration. For the last 3 or 4 years, Deb has had pool parties in her above ground pool. No, it's in the ground.
No, it's above the ground.
Is it above the ground? And I have been invited. And every spring I think I'm not going to get the postcard saying the pool party dates this year. But so far I've made the A list. So. And we exercise in the water.
Don't tell everything.
Thank you, James.
Yeah.
I really appreciate being invited here. And I didn't realize I'd get to see so many old friends. I haven't seen Connie for ages. Do you even remember me, Connie?
I do.
We used to see each other when you were Harrison.
That's right.
And Faylene and I are Okies. I'm an Okie, and I've been in Faylene's house, but she probably doesn't remember that. You don't live there anymore, I don't think.
Yes, I
Do
do.
you?
Yes.
Well, we have a new mutual friend, Diane Brown, that talks about you now, so I'm just thrilled to get to see people I haven't seen for a while. Right up to this minute, I still don't know what to read. I brought a part from the book that I'm working on right now, but I also brought this little journal, which is, I've made my living as a writer now for like 35 years. Oh my. So I figured in that time, if you're actually doing this every day, you start to think of different uses, ways that your writing builds you in a way, I guess, things you can use your writing for. So I don't really know how to talk about this without sounding really, really whiny and ungrateful, but I'll try. A few years ago, my parents were both in their 80s, and they both needed help, and they chose me, the child who's here, to be their caretaker. And I'm totally unsuited for that kind of job. I don't know how to cook, for one thing, and I just wasn't very good at it. But nevertheless, I was their caretaker for several years. And I lost the time to write, so it bothered me from several angles, and yet at the same time it was wonderful to be around them, and I need to write a memoir of this for myself to put it all in place in my heart, because obviously I don't have it there yet. It's still a tangle of emotions in my, but they both passed away in 2010. Daddy died in April, and Mom died in October, and the 6 months between April and October were nearly unbearable for me, because we were all grieving Daddy, and my mother wasn't doing well at all, and I think maybe just the event of Daddy's death had sort of made her not see things clearly. So anyway, trust me, that 6 months I don't think I would live over for any amount of money, and I thought I was about to have a nervous collapse of some kind, so I turned to my writing, because I firmly believe that writing can save your life in all kinds of situations. You just need to know how to apply it. So I had this little journal. I love journaling, and this was a special journal I bought. I think I bought this in England, maybe. And I hadn't wanted to use it for anything, but I decided I was going to use it. We moved way out to the woods when I was kind of at a crisis point with the caretaking thing, and I just thought maybe if I have a change, from living in a 2-story old farmhouse to living in a little tiny house in the woods, maybe it'll improve my attitude, because I didn't like myself. I was too grouchy all the time. So we moved 7 years ago, way, you would love it, Tony, out in the country, real primitive out there. So I thought, okay, I have to be at Mom's house every morning by 8. I have to have the food cooked to take over there. They lived in Lincoln, so it was just about 15 minutes for me. So I said to my dog, we're going to get up at 5, and every morning we're going to get lost in the woods from 5 to 6:30, and then we'll go back in and have the rest of the day. And during that time, I said, Imogene, at the edge of the driveway, when we walk out of the driveway, we're not going to think for an hour and a half. No thinking. We're just going to experience things through our senses. And then we're going to come back after an hour and a half, and I, with your help, am either going to write a poem or draw something. And I have never been able to draw at all, but still I tried. Marin, don't even look at this. I tried to more or less learn to draw or write an impression or glue some pictures of birds into a book. Something that is just totally, purely creative without any thought involved, with pure sense information. And this saved my life, doing this every morning for the 6 months between the dates of my 2 parents' death. It was such a healing experience. So I thought I might read. I can't write poetry at all, never have been able to. My daughter is a wonderful, wonderful poet. And the few times that we do twin poetry sometimes, like we said, okay, let's do Demeter and Persephone, the old Greek myth. Demeter's the mother, Persephone's the daughter. JD said, I'll write the daughter, you write the mother. So we spent like a month doing that, and I thought mine was so good. And then I took it and we read each other's, and I just tore mine up because hers was. So I know I can't write poetry, but oddly enough, I think I kind of could write poetry when Imogene and I were doing this 6-month walking in the woods and healing type thing. So I thought I might read one of the poems that I wrote then. And I don't know if it's good or not. Oh, look at this turtle I drew. It may be kindergarten level, but I promise you it's way, way better than anything I would have done before. So for some reason, art really, really, really did heal me during this 6 really, really hard months. And I'm sorry to sound so whiny about that because my folks were the most wonderful people in the whole world. It was just a time conflict, and I've got to work it all out in my head. Sometimes I glued sycamore bark and feathers and things in here. But anyway, I highly recommend this kind of don't think, just experience journaling for anybody who's having a hard time, or a good time, or whatever. Oh, here's some snails I drew. When I show this to 2nd graders, they're really impressed. You seem moderately impressed. You could just be faking that. Sometimes, I'm going to go back, one of my favorite card writers is here today. She's in a booth down across there. I got to know her work when she had a shop in Rocheport. And she happened to tell me that she collects heart-shaped rocks. I said, me too. And so I actually have a little tiny heart-shaped rock glued into one page of this journal one morning when I noticed we were finding a lot of heart-shaped rocks in the creek. So if I can find this poem, I should probably save this for Halloween because it's about the ghosts that I felt out at Coal Camp Creek one day, but oh well. If I can find it, I had it marked. I live on Coal Camp Creek. This is what Coal Camp Creek looks like, water. It's a creek.
Oh yeah.
Can't put anything past me. Okay, this is a poem I wrote one morning when the mist was rising off the creek. When Coal Camp Creek is white shrouded and silent, it's easy to think the spirits of this place have risen with the mist by some good grace neither my dog nor I can understand. At first we merely watch and wonder, then Imogene goes rigid and alert, pricking her ears, hearing whispers I can't hear, seeing ancient movement in this wafting fog. So many lie beneath these stone hills, brought low by summer bite or winter chill, by mischance with axe or arrowhead, with resting wire or in childbirth bed. So many were camp or cabin born with no breath to live, no voice for love or need to forgive. How many were taken in the creek's chilly arms, pulled into strong current without time for a call of alarm no one would have heard anyway. One last beat brings a rush of clear water and another heart begins its transformation into beautifully veined and oddly shaped river rock. But standing beside Imogene on this bank at dawn, it's the mourners I mourn, those who chose to bear their hard load of winter grief, but finally succumbed when a harsh March wind brought hopelessness, where shreds of hope had tried to catch purchase and grow, like the delicate bleeding heart that covers our bluff in May. The broken-hearted have arisen here too, oh yes. This mist protects its holy mysteries, but that still raw heartbreak alone comes through, an eternal lament, unmistakable. Well, we walk on, Imogene and I. If ghosts are here, they mean us no harm and deserve their sacred privacy. They are beyond whatever needs brought them from Germany or across some ancient strait. They are beyond the conflicts, the greeds, the loves, the accidents, the purposes both selfish and selfless that lured them to this place of stone and quickly flowing water and forests so tangled they hide everything but their own treacherous beauty, and occasionally this silent swirling mist that finally rises to the trees and turns, just for now, to cloud. So that's the kind of thing that healed my heart for some reason, to get out of my own head and into the beauty that we have around our countryside. Where we live, there was a Battle of Coal Camp was fought nearby there. It's real close to where Marin lives, in the same sort of woods I do. And then it seems like I never stopped whining. It must be really intrinsic to my personality. When my parents died in 2010, they left behind a house that was just crammed with stuff, a big house crammed with stuff. And it seems like, in fact, this morning before I came here, I was still throwing stuff into a dumpster. It seems like I've spent 2 years uncluttering and cleaning and so forth, and my sister in Oregon has called and said, why don't you hire somebody to do that? And I've said, because you can't hire anybody to do any stuff this hard. It's really hard. My fingernails are all broken. I'm trying to put her on a guilt trip, because we inherited the house together, in case you haven't figured that. So anyway, it really surprises me when I'm writing for kids, or when I'm writing at all, how much of my real life ends up getting into the book, no matter how far removed the book is. So right now I'm writing, I've got a contract for a medieval story for teenagers. It's set in the year 1009 in the 11th century. A really awful thing happened in England in the year 1009. It was called the St. Brice's Day Massacre. And it was when the Vikings and the Saxons had been at war for 300 years. And the king, King Ethelred, was at the Saxon king was at his wit's end. So he issued a decree that for one day, all of his Saxon subjects who were loyal to him to prove their patriotism were to go out of their houses and find any Scandinavians, including the people who had settled in villages 300 years previously, and kill them. So this was his, prove your patriotism. You signed an oath of loyalty to me when you were 12. Now prove it by doing this. So it's come through history. It's known as the St. Brice's Day Massacre. Took place in November. On the 12th, I think, was St. Brice's Day. And we don't have any record in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle of how many people actually did that, but we do know that a whole bunch of Danes were locked inside the church at Oxford, and the church was set on fire. So we do know that a lot of people were burned to death in the church in Oxford. So my book is about a little Danish boy who escapes the Oxford fire. All of his family, all of his friends, his grandmother, everybody has been killed in that fire, and he escapes. So it goes through a 6-year period from the time of the fire, when he is 9, until he's 16. But my math, I'm an English person, not a mathematician. I know that 9 plus 6 doesn't equal 16, but still that's what I think. It's 6 years. It must be 7 years. I hope I have to go back through and figure that chronology right. So I thought I'd just read this 5 or 6 pages. After he escapes the fire, he's frozen almost to death on the banks of the River Thames, runs into the water he's scarred pretty badly to put out the fire. He's frozen to the riverbank, and some river pirates come down on their pirate barge and pick him up, thinking he's dead, and they'll search him for any valuables and then throw him back overboard, but he's not dead. So he spends the next couple of months drifting out, in and out of consciousness. So then, let's see. Okay, how about this? I'm trying to find a good place to start here. I think the theme of this book is trust and trustworthiness, is sort of, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. Okay, so the kid has regained consciousness, and the Captain Drago, has decided that he wants to train this kid to be his apprentice. So gradually, in his heart of hearts, Captain Drago imagined keeping the boy as a ship's apprentice, whereupon he himself would school him in the intricate skills of thievery and deception. He pictured the boy with his bright face tilted up, eagerly listening to a lifetime of seafaring wisdom imparted by himself, Captain Drago. As winter waned and spring came on, Captain Drago began a list of things in his head he'd impart to the lad, who sat upright now and showed a few signs he was regaining his wits. He sometimes followed them with his eyes as they moved about cooking. During one loud fracas upon the deck, when a trio of country rubes they'd picked up would not go gently overboard, Jills had even walked to the cabin door to stand watching. The captain's eyes sparkled, and he grinned a rare grin when he noticed him there. "Soon you'll partake in this thievery yourself, my little Dane," Captain Drago promised. Meanwhile, thwacking the stubborn rube, he punished with a hard enough blow to the ear to finally convince him to dive. Though the bumpkin protested all the way to the water that he could not swim. "I shall teach you everything I know," the captain merrily called to Jills above the man's last cries. Swordplay, seaman's knots, amputation of limbs, grappling the dead, grappling a small boat, grappling the living who'd particularly been unwilling to come aboard, clubbing fish, clubbing persons. The list grew in his mind whenever Captain Drago had the leisure to fantasize. He'd teach torture by cutting, torture by drowning, torture by hanging a noose over the water and letting the prisoner's imagination do the rest. Hiding gold, hiding other booty, weighting a body so it sank and sank. He would teach him so much it would be like having a son of his own. But things did not work out the way Captain Drago dreamed they might. For the dead boy, they call him the dead boy, the dead boy, even when he'd come as alive again as he would come, was not the apt pupil the captain had longed for and pinned his bright hopes upon. Though by summer, Jills took meals with the others, it was obvious a candle had been snuffed. Even pirates, not known for the understanding of the nuances of the human soul, could tell when someone was hurting. Jills seldom smiled, never cried. He tried to remember nothing from his past. He had an arrow point embedded in his blistered left palm, and though he liked it well enough, he didn't know why it was there or how it had come to be there. But he was useless to them, and this showed itself in a shocking way the first time he was told to rob passengers of their jewelry. The said passengers on that day, a tiny bent grandmother with her two large grandsons, had their hands raised high in the air. All their weepy-eyed attention was upon the sharp blades of Knob Snuff and Captain Drago. Will Primrose was cutting their purses from their waists. "Boy, unclasp the brooches from the lady's cloak, then take the rings from the fingers of all three," the captain called to Jills. This was a small task and not a dangerous one, merely an initiation any child could have easily accomplished. But Jills stayed frozen in the doorway, his eyes round and his skin so white, his newly healed burns blushed red. Captain Drago bellowed, "Do as you're told, dead boy, or we cut you ear to ear as neatly as Will Primrose presently cuts these purse strings." Still, Jills did not move, leaving Will Primrose to take the brooches and rings himself. When the passengers had been stranded, Jills was whipped by Knob Snuff, though half-heartedly. The pirates had discussed the matter beforehand and saw little to be accomplished by brutal punishment. "I fear he has scruples about stealing," the captain murmured sadly, "as you have scruples, Knob Snuff, about boiling crab before it's killed." "I hear the crab scream in me nightmares," Knob Snuff mumbled in his own defense. Will Snuff sighed, "And yet what good is a pirate who scruples over theft?" Once they've recognized him as not being pirate material, the thoughts of the crew were on how to get rid of him. They might bind him and shove him overboard, strand him somewhere, or in many other ways shed the burden of his keep. Yet as luck would have it, before anyone could act upon such thoughts, Jills made himself necessary. It happened accidentally on a hot night when a rough gambling confrontation with a rival pirate crew led to a brawl on the deck of the River Dragon. 7 pirates in all, drunk, fighting with short knives. Knob Snuff lost 2 toes. One of the rival pirates might well have bled to death as he left most of a leg upon the deck when they swam back to their own boat. The deck of the River Dragon was a mess and normally would have been left that way until a chance rain or rough waters settled the stink and stickiness of it. Captain Drago, Will Primrose, and Knob Snuff went to their hammocks and slept the sleep of painful drunken exhaustion, as was their long-standing practice. They awoke the next morning to find Jill scrubbing the deck, cleaning, upon his knees, using a handful of rough rope and peeling away layers and layers of muck and carnage. He's cleaning, Will Primrose explained to the others who stood and gawked. I've seen it performed before in public houses. As we all have, Will Primrose, Captain Drago murmured, but this is not a pub. Because you see a cow milked, would you then go milk a cat? Hob Snuff worked up a hock of spittle and bent to spread it on the wound of his lost toes. I've heard it said of the Danish race, he told them, that they have a sort of clean fever about them. They bathe weekly and use combs upon their hair equally often. Saxon men lose favor with their womenfolk, it said, when Danish men live nearby with this clean fever of theirs. Bathe weekly? Captain Drago repeated in disbelief. Certainly that must be misheard rumor. And anyway, Jill's makes him indispensable, and all through the book he's indispensable to various people because he cleans. Thank you for having me. This is so much fun to be here. I can see why you guys keep doing this. Thank you, James.
You're welcome.